Books are always considered our unknown friends, and we all know that. But since these days everything is getting digitized and children are not getting focused towards reading books, and every time a parent or a teacher is focusing and encouraging the children to read, most often we keep hearing from our kids. And our kids say most of the time that reading is boring. I don't want to read. It is not interesting. I don't enjoy reading. I want to play. But for some kids, reading is not that hard at all. It's quite easy for them and they found it interesting. But for some, it's really hard and they don't find it interesting either. And why is such a difference? It's only because they have not found the right source of reading material which encourages and motivates them to read. Hi, I'm Divya Madhukar. Since I'm an early childhood educator, a Montessori coach, mother of two, teacher trainer, curriculum and content developer for preschoolers, parents often ask me, Divya, how can I motivate my child to read? Before we get started, I want to take a quick poll in understanding where our children stand when it comes down towards reading. Does your child love reading? Or does your child dislike reading? Or does your child pick up a reading book and leaves it without completing reading? And where do they stand? Let me know on that. And this is very important for us to understand if your child is a fluent reader or is still struggling to read. And most parents and teachers, we all know that reading is very, very important for our language development. And most teachers and parents, we all know that reading is important for our language development and for our general success. But still, even after so much of efforts, our kids do struggle. They become reluctant towards reading or they become resistant readers. What could have been the cause for it? Are children willingly doing it? No, they don't do it anything willingly. There could be possible reasons. Let's find out and help the child in case if they are suffering from these problems. Maybe they are having issues with fluency. Maybe they have issues or they have gaps in phonogram dictionaries. Maybe they are just guessing the words and they're not following the rules of making up the words. Or maybe they do not have enough number of words in their vocabulary. Or maybe the child is literally suffering from a learning disability. Or maybe sometimes it could be dyslexia. If this could be the area of weakness of your child, we as teachers and parents, we got to identify this area. Only once we recognize this area or a loophole which our child is struggling, we would be able to help the child. We will be able to guide him so that, we motivate them towards reading in the right way. Thereby, the child becomes an emergent or a fluent reader. How could we help? It's very simple. We're going to just create a prepared environment which is going to inspire the curiosity of our children to read. In today's session, I will share you some simple, effective ways to motivate your child to read. And please remember, some children will need more encouragement than others. And if you can create a supportive setting, your child will be more inclined to request and to reach for books so that they would read and they would enjoy reading. So let's find out some tips. Tip number 1. Set up or simplify your home. Are we talking about any changes to make it up? No, not at all. So take a look around your house from the eyes of your child. Are there any books visible? Of course. When you have children, obviously you will have books, right? The books will definitely be visible. But what I wanted you all to focus is, are they organized? Yes. Are they organized? Do check on that. Do you have an organized space to store your kids' books? It's very important. An organized space is going to allow a child to notice books and at the same time, they become much more attentive if the books are visible. During any time, it could be story time or a bedtime or a writing time or a read up time, the child will be able to notice books and they become much more attentive because the child is always seeing the books. They're seeing the cover pages of the books. They identify the book just by the cover. Even though the child has not learned to read up the words or the context of the book, but they would still be able to identify the book just by the cover page. So let's make sure the books are visible most of the time. And why is it important? because kids will always have a hard time noticing books in a cluttered room, especially with toys and electronics and gadgets and households around the books. So let's create a clutter free space so that our children can peacefully sit down in any particular corner of your house where you create it, and then the child will have a good time reading. Let's encourage this. Tip number 2: turn off the TV, iPad, computer, and put away your cell phones. Very, very important to take down. I know during this pandemic, we're all addicted to this, but let's make sure that this should not become an overstimulative to our child. Okay, because the electronic gadgets can overstimulate our child, and our children can become addictive to this, and the devices are very, very addictive. So let's turn off this. Now, before doing this, just as a cluttered space can distract a child from reading, we all have to understand that screen time is also a major obstacle towards reading. And it also has many negative effects. The effects need not show up immediately. It could be a short-term effect or a long-term effect, but it is definitely going to have many negative effects on the child's neurodevelopment. And it's proven, it's researched. Okay, so please let's take care of this and reduce the screen time of our children. And how would we do that? There's a personal note from me. I always recommend our parents and caretakers to follow a time schedule. Let's have a quick schedule so that we can watch television on a particular time or keep away our mobile phones when we are with our children. We have a specific time to browse on internet, or we play a computer game together at home. But we're going to have a very, very limited screen time to do this. When it gets overstimulated, when we do not have a watch over time on this, our children do get addicted to it. And I always say that our children are greatly influenced by what they see. So let's practice some discipline at home, thereby cutting our screen time. This is very important. Tip number 3: read with your child every day. This is very, very important. To begin this, make a habit of reading at least 10 to 15 minutes every day as a family. I know we're all doing this, but in case if you haven't, please make sure that you read at least 10 to 15 minutes every day. As a family, you could sit together, pick up any book, and you could read to your child. And every time that you're reading aloud, okay, so I want you to read aloud and make sure that your children are not interrupting you when you're reading the book. And once you start making this kind of a pattern, the child will be able to see a great improvement in language development. When there's a good language development, the literacy skills will become even more better. So try to read aloud to your child. Okay, so this is important. And what kind of books can we read? You can read storybooks, you can read any kinds of Panchatantra tales, you could read moral books or values, anything, but just read it. When could you read it? There is no specific time. Whatever is much more convenient to you as a family, you could read at that particular time. But what I would always suggest is always try to also read when your child is just about to, go for bed, or when after making a bed, you can quickly read a book. Well, I used to read more number of stories during the bedtime. Sometimes I used to read 2 to 3 books. Some days it used to be more than 5 or 6, or sometimes it used to end up even 7 books before the bedtime. And without hesitation, my kids would always love to, read. They should never like sleeping, but they rather liked reading the books a lot during the bedtime. So for me, what worked best towards reading was the bedtime. Okay, so they learnt a lot. So you see what works out best for you and for your child, and you practice the same. So if you would like to read more books, probably you could set up or you could start your bedtime routine a little earlier. So when you start a little earlier, you get to read more stories, and that's a small suggestion. If it works, please look into it. So this was our tip number 3. And always encourage your children to visit libraries in case if you have a school library or a neighborhood library or a community library. I would always encourage you to take your child to the bookstores or to libraries. Let them browse through it. So what books interest them, they would have more interest towards reading them also. Let them turn around. So thereby, you're also teaching children to value the books and to respect the books, so that the child will know to maintain in an orderly way of keeping the books. They would see that order. They would see the sequence, like how the libraries keep the books. So thereby, they might try and replicate the same kind of a behavior at home also. So try encouraging, take them to a library once in a while. Don't miss out this opportunity. And there are wonderful books which is available online, which could be based on themes, which could be based on age. So you could choose books and you could read through it. So there's nothing that is going to stop. So you could choose and you know the best what could be for your child. So the last one could be like there are many talking books available online. There are audiobooks which is available online. So more you can download them. There are many free resources. So more often that your child is listening to these audiobooks, the child will be able to learn on the punctuations, especially the way it is announced, or the punctuations, the enunciations. They would be able to learn the new words, and that's going to be a great help for their vocabulary. So I would always suggest, so let them listen to some of the audiobooks. So you could Google, or you could there are wonderful resources on YouTube also. So take a look. So tip number 4 is encourage reading by gifting books. It's something which is very very good enough. Whenever your friends or relatives ask for gift suggestions, please put books on your wish list, or you could always keep that as a top priority. Why gifting books is so good is only because every time, see, gift is very special to us, right? So when you start gifting books, books become very special to children. Okay, and they keep it really safe. They value the gift, and they become happier because you gifted them with the book. So you need to encourage this. So always do not give only toys, but always try and attempt for gifting books, and children will be able to consider that to be as very special. And every time that you do and you cultivate this habit of gifting books, that's the best thing that you could ever do it for a child, so that they develop multilingual language development. Their language development becomes amazing. So try gifting books more often. Okay, so tip number 5, make cards for friends and family. So card making is very natural way to encourage reading and writing practice. And it's always good to make a card for your loved ones rather than buying one. Why would I encourage this? As a parent, I always encourage my children to write a personal note rather than texting me or emailing me, or even buying out a card. I always ask them to write a personal note, and I still have it till date. So every time that we look back onto those memories, you could see how the child's handwriting has changed over a period of time. You could also see that how grammatically the child is written. And writing and expressing something is like, the child is able to express all their thoughts in a form of communication. And they take the medium as writing, right? And language, it could be anything. Language is just a barrier. But what is more important is our child able to communicate their thoughts in the form of writing. And when you read it, it becomes even more special to all of us. So that's the reason I always encourage you to make up cards. You encourage your children to make up cards, so you could exchange messages, any small event at your home or a gathering or somebody is coming, let them write a small note, so this is going to bring a lot of peace at home, and children would start loving to exchange messages. It's wonderful. So make cards and share messages. Tip number 6, have fun with literacy activities. I know reading and literacy is little boring. Sometimes children do consider, but have good amount of simple games and activities. And this is one way that you could motivate your children, to engage with lots and lots of words when they're like learning it for the very first time. I'll also share you some links in the descriptions. You could take a look through. So these are some of the simple games that you could, make it, or you could work with your child and play along. Okay, so that's one thing. Tip number 7, like turn to stories for answers and support. Now this is something which I personally encourage everybody to do it, because storytelling is very very different than reading book. Okay, so when you're just allowing your child, or when your child is just ready and begin for schooling, what we could do is, like, we could always read books on going to school. Okay, so what do we discuss in that? So we discuss about the school, we discuss about the teachers, we discuss about the other friends, the toys, or the activities that we do over here. Now more that you talk about going to school and you start reading about that, the children are able to visualize the pictures which is printed in the book. There's some kind of an imaginary world the child creates, the imaginary environment that the child creates, and the child is now very much confident. He knows what it is. He knows that, okay, I go to school, I find a teacher, I find my friends, I have some toys, I have some activity area, I'm going to be doing a particular task. The child understands and he's very much well prepared. So thereby, it is going to give much more confidence for the child whenever he's having that transmission phase from, like getting separated from a parent, going to the school for a particular while and then getting back. And over a period, the books become his great friends. So that's the reason. So whatever could be the situation, try and find out certain books which is going to help your child build emotionally. Okay. Same way, like, whenever you want to introduce grace or courtesy to your children, you could read a lot of behavioral books. Okay, never preach them on morals and values. Okay, so do not tell, most of the stories have the moral of the stories, the value of the stories. Never do that. You read a story and ask questions to your children. Was that correct? Let them express their opinion. Sometimes they might find it, or you might have a different answers coming out. Let them build on that. Let the child identify what was the story all about. And more you do that, the child will be able to also see, like, what kind of a behavior that the character had in that particular story. And sometimes the children, if in case if something is matching with their behavior, they might also change. So these kinds of books are very important for us to work on the behavioral development, to introduce grace and courtesy. And every time, I always tell that, so where every time that you're reading, read about how characters in the books experience different emotions. It's very important. And whoever it could be the story narrator, please express with expressions and talk about the emotions. Okay? And also talk about how your child felt reading that book or listening to that particular book as you read. Now, these emotions are very important. They get very, very inclined to it. And when you share such relevant stories with children, books become a healthy coping mechanism. For any kind of new situations and challenging emotions, they become their unexpected friend. They understand it. So it's very important, and I love this particular way of doing storytelling. So storytelling is one very important area of mine, and I love doing this in my class. So tip number 8, brainstorm stories together. And this one is also one of my favorite things to do. So when my sons were very young, I always encouraged them to write stories. The stories could be about the day in the class. It could be the story about what happened in the bus when they traveled to school, or it could be like how was their pastime during the weekend, to write something about their friends, or to write something about our pet. So it could be many stories, and they wrote it. It was all, nothing was forced, and the child started writing. And more that I encouraged them to write stories, children became very, very expressive. And sometimes we used to just sit down, we used to chat, we made up stories on our drive, on our ride, and children started coming up with more and more. And they started expressing even more better. And eventually, whatever they had in their mind, it got converted into the thoughts, and the thoughts became into words, and they were able to communicate everything, and they wrote down into sentences, and I could feel it. It was with much more emotions. It had much more, the depth when I read it, and they were able to express it even more better. So it's always good to encourage them to write stories. But remember, whatever it takes, try to create an environment that naturally motivates your child to read. As I mentioned earlier, try to create a small space and put some motivating posters over there. So when the child sees that particular place itself, he should get motivated towards reading. Okay, so in summary, always remember that children will be motivated to read only when parents and caregivers are modeling good reading habits. So when we read, they read. Books should be accessible, they should be relevant, they should be interesting for any child. And apart from books also, we got to create lots and lots of reading opportunities. What do I mean by that? So let them, when you're going to a restaurant, ask them to read the signs. When you're on a driveway, ask them to read whatever they find on the way. So wherever it's possible, however it's possible, try to create reading opportunities for your child. So, what was your favorite way to motivate your child? Do let me know. I would love to hear all your ideas in the comment section below. And if you're feeling stuck, just don't give up. Habits do take time to form, and I sincerely hope these ideas are going to help spark that love for reading for your child. So, happy reading. If you love watching this video and if you found that these tips are helpful, and if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do subscribe to Trend Brand Preschool. We make a lot of educational videos and certain inspirational ones and some study content to help your children grow. So happy learning and happy reading. Thank you so much and have a great day.